Hello, everybody. Um, I'm here to present to you um, a low-income housing tax credit underwriting model. This is a development deal I was looking at a few years ago. We ended up not moving forward with it, um, but it was interesting. It was a piece of property in the Bronx. It was a parking lot. Um, you can see here. Here's what the parking lot looks like. Um, a couple train station options, some bus options. And what we were proposing was to do ground up development to do affordable housing. So it was going to be roughly 100,000 square feet with commercial on the first floor. We're thinking about putting a grocery store and then having residential floors up above. The deal also had a fresh food bonus option as well. So we were thinking about, bringing in a grocery store, and the person who was selling it actually already had a draft of a contract with C-Town to do the deal. We were also going to bring in a nonprofit partner, which we'll talk about in a little bit. To finance this project, we were going to use low-income housing tax credits and tax-exempt bonds using HPD's supportive housing loan program. The state also has a supportive housing loan program. Supportive housing largely is folks who are formerly homeless, but there's a number of other categories of folks who need this housing. They have different programs set up for them. Here's kind of an overview of the sources and uses of this deal. So let me jump into the Excel model. Okay. First, let's start on the unit and income tab. On this particular project, it was a total of, I believe, roughly 150 units, with 50% of them being supportive housing units, or in this case, in this project, individuals who were formerly homeless. So we had a nonprofit that would bring the subsidy for those apartments, and then the other portion of the units would be just for folks who were 60% of AMI and below. You can see the AMI bands up here. Here you'll see the expenses. One of the measures I like to look at when I'm looking at expenses is what's the dollar per unit number. When a building is ran very well, it's at about 5,000. When a building is not ran that well, it's at 8,000. And this one's at 7,200. We were a little conservative with this number. We figure we'll have one super, we're gonna have 2 elevators, and everything else here is pretty straightforward. On the loan sizing size, we have the residential income, a little bit of the extra income gives us a total of 2.2 million. The operating expenses are $1 million. That makes the NOI, net operating income, 1.1 million. Here in Excel, this mortgage is actually calculated here using the amount that you have left over when you have your NOI to help you determine how much you can spend on your mortgage. Interest rate is 5.7. Interest rates were more expensive a couple years ago, so it's definitely going to be a lot cheaper today than it was before. But pretty straightforward. So we have the LIHTC model, which is a sister organization of HPD. At HPD and HFA, the city and the state, they both have supportive housing loan programs. Right? So you have all of those great subsidies, and you get a grand total of, first mortgage, second mortgage, third mortgage. We have the LIHTC equity on this tab here. The total cost of the project here is shown here, which actually matches the total costs here. Land costs, hard costs, soft costs, fees, carrying costs, and then the grand totals. So in the tax credits, they have what they call eligible basis and non-eligible basis. An eligible basis basically means everything, all the costs that you incur after you close. So that means not the land, not the fees you pay to the banks, maybe even your consultants, but everything after you close is considered eligible basis, which then ties up here. So you do on eligible per unit basis, a max of 400, which are under that. We have now an eligible basis of 151 units. If we had the maximum, in this case, it is actually 49,388, which is totaled right here, right? We have an eligible basis of 49. There's what they call a basis boost, meaning if you're in an area that's difficult to develop, you actually get a 30% boost on the basis. So instead of a 14 million basis, I'm sorry, instead of a 49 million basis, it's 49 plus 14, which a total of 64, right? 100% of the units are affordable. The annual tax rate used to be 3.2. That gives you a grand total of 2.1 million of tax credit equity that this project justifies, right? So let's say we have a low-income housing tax credit purchaser. They would actually purchase 99% of our tax credits. We as a sponsor would keep 0.01%. So that means if they paid $1 for each one of those credits, they pay $1 by the 2.1 million. That gives you a grand total of 21 million, right? So 21 million is the total low-income housing tax credit equity that the deal can justify, right? And you fast forward back over here, you see that 21 million again, right? Let's zip over to the development budget tab. You can see the cost of the land. You can see the cost of renovations and new construction. Again, all the fees, all the consulting fees are all based over here. And that gives you down to a grand total of 64 million, right? So you got the first mortgage, second mortgage, third mortgage, you know, those are good. And now you have the LIHTC equity, which is the last piece of the puzzle, right? I don't know if in this particular case where they use $997,000 in deferred interest. They don't necessarily always let you carry that interest over. On this particular project, the land cost was 7.7, the hard cost was 37 million. Developer's fee in this case was 7.8 million. One of the motivations for real estate development and affordable development for that matter is they make you defer your developer's fee until a later date. So they say, hey, instead of taking all your profits up front, how about you leave some of that in the project? So lots of developers do that. So you'll see right here, there's a deferred developer's fee. There's an amount that's left in the deal that will come over time. So that typically comes out through the cash flow. So you get a little bit of developer's fee in the front, and then you get the rest through the cash flow here, right? And the cash flow on the last page, you'll see is your profits over 15 years. So over 15 years, there's a total net cash flow of 3.6. 3.6. So I should adjust this. So this should be a max of no more than that 3.6. You can't defer more than your 15 years of cash flow. I'll make that edit now. So let's say I came here, like the 0, we have a new gap. Yeah, just so you can see how this works. Let's say I go to loan sizing. I tell them I need a little bit more in subsidy. I'll say city, I need a little more subsidy so that this is a good and profitable deal. Right? So instead of trying to defer that 4.7, now it'll be a much smaller number, 3531, 2898, 824. Right? So now we're going to defer 2.8, which is less than this 3.6, which is good. Again, the general idea is that the developer won't take all their profits and run, that you're going to be motivated to keep the building up to par because part of your profit is coming out of the building over time, right? So deferred developer fee of 2.8 million, you have the developer's fee of 7.8. So you'll get, roughly, in this project's case, roughly $5 million in developer's fee, which is essentially your profit out of the project. Now it's hard and it's slow and it's a lot of paperwork, but that is largely how the deal pencils out. So this is a very typical example of a 4% tax credit, as they call it, or non-competitive tax credit, where we're not submitting an application to the state or the city. We're actually just going in and say, hey, we want to do this project. It meets the parameters. We don't have to do any competitive things or going into any crazy application processes. I will say in New York, there's way too much money and not enough subsidy within the building departments. So it's a bit of a dilemma that lots of us are trying to figure out. How can we continue to do this business model when cities are cutting back on budgets largely across the country? So great example of a low-income housing tax credit deal, and I'll talk to you soon.